Welcome, I'm Rogers Anderson, and today we have one of our special shows as we travel around throughout Williamson County and our cities. There are oftentimes silent people here in Williamson County that have such a direct impact, and one of those is Rick Warrick. Most of you will know Rick. I've lived in this town since the 1980s, and I think you were one of the first people that people said, we want to know the history. Rick Warrick's one that would have an influence. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you here. You've got such a decorated history of being involved with so many different groups and organizations, and the preservation of history, historical side, but also digging up a lot of information for so many different groups. But before we actually look at Rick Warrick through your eyes for our county, I need to know a little bit about Rick Warrick. Where did you start life from, and how did you get involved in this? What did you do for a living? And all of that's so interesting.
Well, you know, our paths almost crossed, I guess. I was born in Knox County in 1947, St. Mary's Hospital, and but I grew up in Anderson County. That's where the Warricks hail from, and went to school. Little country school called Fairview, and then went to Norris High School, and then 1965 came west to Middle Tennessee, Murfreesboro, and really never moved back. Met a local girl from Williamson County, Elaine Ladd, and we married in '69. Then we taught a year in Sumner County and realized it was best to come back on the south side of Nashville. So 1970, we moved back August of '70 and been here ever since.
Now, was she one of the Ladd that we hear the name of?
Well, the old Noble Ladd was an early settler here, and she's one of the descendants. Her granddaddy was Mr. Will Ladd, lived out at Millview, Arnold Road.
And there's a whole group of the Ladds, and we'll get off from your wife. He wasn't to interview her. I guess I should interview her for this, shouldn't I?
She's put in a lot of time in this county.
Well, and she's just about as well known as you are in the things that she does. But I knew she was a Ladd, and I was wondering in Albert, some of those probably were some of her.
You mean Al?
Yeah.
Yeah, Al was her uncle. Ed was her father. He died last year. So, yeah, Bobby T's the only one, and Matty Cova's the only one left.
Let's talk a little bit about you and how you got involved in this community, and why such the historical side. Being from Knox County myself, I was actually born in Anderson County.
Were you?
And my mother and daddy met during World War II, and we lived a little while in Oak Ridge, Anderson County, and then we moved to a little, at that time, it was just an old country place called Farragut.
I know exactly where it is.
And we would go down, Lenore City was Concord.
Yeah.
Lenore City was closer than it was going back up into Bearden and Knoxville. So my whole life grew up at Dixie Lee Junction.
That's
and
right.
Places like that. But I mean, to leave Anderson County, Norris, beautiful area, lakes, mountains. You and I have some common grounds, but there's one thing in Middle Tennessee we don't have is mountains.
That's right.
As a general rule, and our lake system consists mostly of the Harpeth.
Yeah. Periodically.
Periodically. Yeah, that's true. But how did you get involved in so much of the history and become such an authority?
I started out at Hillsboro when it was a high school in '71, and I taught the history. It was a small school, of course, and
that was interesting. If I can interrupt you, Hillsboro back in those days was a high school.
It was. They were. In 1971, there was College Grove, Bethesda, Hillsboro, Fairview, and Franklin. And the College Grove, Bethesda, and Hillsboro were 1 through 12. Then in '72, we got a kindergarten, so that added a grade. But then by '76, it became pretty evident that the school was too small for the size, and a high school really needed to be. Those kids need to be exposed to a wider range, and so they moved the 12th and 10th grade to Franklin.
So you kind of have migrated to the point you're no longer teaching.
Yeah.
haven't taught for several years, became involved in the history of this county and certainly one of the leading authorities.
Well, I don't know about authority, but I have spent the last 30 some years really digging almost full time. While I wasn't in the classroom, I was out in the afternoons riding the country roads, going to cemeteries and talking to all the old people, which that was really an important thing because I probably talked to some people and got information that nobody else had ever thought to ask. And I feel fortunate about it because I met some wonderful people. And I really went all over the county. I've probably been on every country road and been to every old house in the county and made some great friends. And it was a good network because I kept revisiting them every time I had another project. And being a teacher and knowing teachers in the little, you can go to Bethesda and, you want to talk to the Bond girls and because they knew everybody in town, or you go to College Grove and you have to talk to the old teachers there, and they would send you out to everyone in the neighborhood. And Nolan's was the same way. So it was a good network, and I joined the Historical Society, the Williamson County Historical Society, in 1974. Miss Mary Trim Anderson was head of the Title I in the county at the time, and she was a great influence on me in the Right to Read program because I was librarian at Hillsborough. She asked me to help her, and she helped me more than I helped her. But she had been president of the Historical Society and invited me to join, and it was one of the best things I've ever done.
Rick, and I guess this is a tough question for you to try to put your arms around and answer. But in your 35, 40 years of kicking over rocks and uncovering things, and I don't know any other way to describe it other than that.
Well, that's about what it
Is there just one particular, not person, but this just event, maybe that's the word I'm looking at, that just captured you and it almost consumes you, that, we never need to forget our history. We hear that as boys growing up. You and I are about the same age. It was taught to us that to remember your history because it will repeat itself.
Well, that's one of the things in teaching, and I taught the high school. Then when the next year I became librarian, and so I had to give up the high school history and taught 7th and 8th grade. And in the 7th grade particularly, it was Tennessee history at the time, and of course the textbook was horrible. And I really made a great effort to try to teach or involve the kids in their local history because there was really nothing written about that. Miss Bowman came out with her book in '71, but it was mainly the early families and the home sites that were there, and so the children out at Hillsborough were mainly ridge runners. They Bending Chestnut, Kingfield, that area, Boston, and so I made a great effort is to have them write or research their family and their community, and then we kind of pulled together. In kind of writing our own little history, and so that kind of led to me getting out and branching out into the neighborhoods because I couldn't, sometimes some information I couldn't get, or the children couldn't get, so I went out and kind of gleaned the neighborhood for that information and then brought it back. But I think probably the greatest influence, I'll never forget, it was probably in '72. We were getting ready to study the Civil War and, of course, the involvement of slavery and all this, and so we only had about a handful of black students at Hillsborough at the time. And so I wanted to include that history, and I knew there had been a large number at one time that lived in the neighborhood. It kind of dwindled down. There wasn't but 2 or 3 black families in the Hillsborough area. And so I had the kids go out during the Christmas break, and I said, talk to the oldest people in your family and see who they remember, and come back. And of course, Dick Pointer was the name that kept popping up, and over the years, that was, it's been 40 years ago now, and I think my work and research in that individual has probably been my greatest joy and success, because I've carried his banner across the state. He's probably recognized as one of the most important craftsmen of that pre-war and after the Civil War individual, and I just keep finding new stuff all the time. I made a lecture, gave a lecture back in Knoxville back in the summer. MESDA from Winston-Salem had a symposium in Knoxville, and they invited me to come and talk about Dick Pointer. And feedback got back that was the best talk of the day, because I brought actual chairs and let people, feel them and get the fine point of what a great craftsman this guy was. And of course, he's a Williamson County guy, and he's a legend.
And today, I mean, I know that you can go down to 5 Points at the archives, the museum, and almost on any given day see you digging in manuals and manuscripts and books and microfiche, you name it. I'm sure you've forgot more about the history of this county than I will ever know, but there's still that love in you.
Well, it's a great, and we are so fortunate, the legacy that Louise left the county by pulling that material together, because it just so happened I dropped out of the classroom in in 93, and that was about the time we started moving the things to the old post office, and I took time. Had time, and I helped involve that in that moving and collecting that material. We found things that didn't know existed, and it was just a treasure. Our county's so fortunate to have not only the material, but now we have it organized in such a way that you can go put your hands on it, and people come from all across the country and are amazed that they're able to touch a document or see a document that their ancestor had written, if it was a will or a deed. And it's I'm just so fortunate. I wake up every day thinking, man, we're really blessed to be in a county like Williamson, and to me it's the finest county in the state, and we've got the greatest, some awful lot of nice people out there.
Well, and when you think about the influence that Louise Lynch had, I know you were there in those early days, but we often have said that she birthed that facility.
Yeah, it was a passion for her, and then just to think we have a backup like Miss Bowman, who is, she has really forgotten more than I'll ever know. But in the past, we've had from all these different communities. If I want to know anything about Flat Creek, you go to Ennis Wallace.
Sure.
And if you want to know anything about Grassman, you went to Miss Lulafane Major or Ann Moran. And unfortunately, those people are in their twilight years now, and if you don't catch it, it's going to be gone.
And it's interesting you say that, kind of jumping around a little bit. We had Mr. Wallace on the show here a couple of months back, and we were talking about some of the Flat Creek days, and I was in one of the local grocery stores a month or so later. Someone had seen it, and they said they never heard, and they were new here. They were, I say 10 years, I'm not sure that's new anymore, but they weren't familiar with the ice cream supper at Flat Creek.
It's the oldest tradition, I guess, in the county.
And he made that statement, and she wanted to know specifically where Flat Creek was and how do you get out there, when is this social? So I know not only do people watch it, enjoy it, and hear comments. So with that in mind, let's go back to Rick Warrick. What kind of, we see a lot of changes here. We're in a community that's the fastest growing county in the state of Tennessee. But yet on the county side, the unincorporated side, in a 10-year window, it just didn't grow 100 people.
Yeah.
The growth is occurring in our cities, and it's a real challenge not to do, it is, I don't mean to downplay what you do, the historical side, doing the research, but it's a real challenge to help create jobs. Governments don't create jobs. They're a facilitator. They're a conduit. And I've said that over and over and over. But all of Cool Springs is a business district that used to be a strawberry field and a cornfield.
That's right. A dairy farm.
A dairy farm. We can go just a stone's throw from here, in a little place called West Haven that may be the most successful urban community that's been put together across the state of Tennessee. The values have continually held up over the last 5 and 6 years, and people continually want to move there for that way of life. But as you go to 30 and 40,000 feet and you look down, the role that you're playing is not just putting a marker on at Leaper's Fork that for a long time was Hillsboro. And many of us still oftentimes make that faux pas of calling it Hillsboro.
Well, it's still Hillsboro to a lot of us, because that was, you got the school there, there's the churches there that have that name. And it goes back early. I mean, it predates Leaper's Fork.
How do we keep, and that's not really your role, but to keep that balance in history and it's almost an infectious appetite of keeping our communities, Leaper's Fork and Hillsboro and College Grove and Flat Creek. You all do your thing in Franklin, is almost what they'll say, but we want our identity too. And so men such as yourself and women such as Virginia Bowman spend a great deal of time of putting plaques and banners and the memorials that you see out there to constantly remind us of who we are and where we came from.
To add a little depth to that, Roger Ring asked Judy Hayes and I during the bicentennial.
Robert Ring. That's okay. That's a compliment to him. It hurts him from my name first. And that was a long period because we were getting ready for the state bicentennial, which was in '96, and so we started before that. Judy and I really looked over the county. We wanted to be sure that the county was well represented, so we really included all the communities. And one of the things that in these little brainstorming sessions that we had was we wanted to be sure that we got every community to have a written history. They had started that back during the Lamar Alexander period when they, were doing these little homecoming things, and Flat Creek got on it very early. Nolensville did it, and Burwood, I think, got it. So anyways, that was one of the things. And then another thing that the Historic Society had started back, I think it was probably about 71 or 2 when they put the historical marker at the old courthouse. That was, I think, the first one. And I remember they were trying to raise money, and back then I think it was $300 or something. And they were, dues were 25 cents, I think. But anyways, we realized, and we got the backing of the committee, is let's go out and see how many sites need a marker, that they need to be recognized. And I think that's probably one of the greatest accomplishments of that whole bicentennial period, because it really went on up into 2000 because the county was 99. And I think, and I get a real kick and reward every time I'm driving down the highway and I see a car pulled off or someone standing around reading a marker. And we are probably one of the most marked counties in the state. You mentioned a minute ago a lady that was influential in your life, that kind of someone that you personally have identified and recognized as had a bearing on your place in life now. And again, I have to ask the question, and since this isn't rehearsed, I'll let you kind of kick it around a little bit, but has there been one particular event or project that you've done that just really sticks out in your mind? I know you talk about the markers and the signs, but your name is just on everything.
Well, probably if when I'm gone, people are going to look back and say, well, what kind of mark did I leave, or a legacy? And I hope that we can look back and say, I've been active in the Historical Society, And about 1984, I think it was, Louise had been kind of the one publishing the journal that the Historic Society puts out. Now, we're a small organization. We now have about 350 members. And they're, some we never see. Some we have a meeting, we have about 100 people show up. But each year we put out a journal, and since I took over as editor, I think in 85 or 86, because Mrs. Mary Trim Anderson had helped me the first year, because Louise and some of the others said it's time for us to, they'd been doing it 16 years.
Time to move around.
It was time to move around. And so I think over the years, I have attempted to publish things that had never been published before, or bring things to light again that needed to be recorded. And I think a few years ago we did it. It took four years to do it, but I reprinted the Who's Who articles that were written by Miss Jane Owen, and that started, a whole. I got people interested in their history because their grandfather. The story was about that family. And I probably have gotten more positive feedback from that project. And it was a long project because we had to type those articles, and I tried to find photographs of the families to kind of enhance the story. And I think still yet today I have people coming in now. Some of the volumes were out of print now, but in time we'll put it online where everybody can access it. It's been indexed, but it needs to be probably gone back and done again. But that period, because it went from in the 30s on up until 54, I believe, and it was every week, the Review-Appeal on Thursdays. Everybody wanted that who Miss Jane was going to write about. Now, Miss Jane's writing is very dated. Everybody was above average, and all the kids were the smartest and the best farmer and the best cook and this kind of thing. But overlooking that, she gives you insight and facts about the family that even the families today don't know.
Well, and that's kind of what we see on this show, that when we broadcast this show, they want to know more about the Virginia Bowmans, the late deceased Mr. Ed Moody.
Yeah.
And certainly your name has now been added to that list. And you have brought so much of the past history. But that next generation too, we need those 20 and 30-year-old young minds that have a great flavor and a history side, that want to be sure that we get that in print, that we keep that going.
Yeah. Well, I think when Lane and I joined the Historic Society, we were the youngest couple in '74, and most of them were, about all, there's not many original ones still living. They're all passed on because they were in their 70s and 80s and 90s. But I did got to know a lot of those people and really appreciate the little time I had to spend with them. And so I'm constantly recruiting new folks, and there's some young minds in the county that are. Chad Gray comes to mind right off. That he's one I can count on if I need an article or some research done that I don't have time to do. He's willing to take it on. He has substituted for me in giving talks when I can't make it. And there's others in the county that are out there, but we need to do more of it because. But I'm finding it's the new folks moving in that seem to have a greater interest in their community than the people who've lived here all their life. Have you found that?
I have found that, and of course you and I are transplants. We'll never be 100% Williamson County.
You can't be. Elaine was born down at Dr. Pyle's hospital, but I was born at St. Mary's in Knoxville.
I was born in Oak Ridge over at Anderson County. But to answer your question, I think it's kind of like if you and I went back to our high school class reunion, that I have found we used to have them every 5 years. Now this gray hair and the class was very small tells you that it's been a long time ago, so there's not as many of them around anymore. But I find when those class reunions are there, that more times than not, the locals that are still there
won't come.
It's the folks that come from out that are dying to meet the others.
I experienced the same thing.
And it's probably that way in this county, that the folks that, the Lynches and the many other families that have born and raised here, they know the history, and they see their families, and they see their aunts and uncles on the Sunday afternoon, or still see them at church or in the local community. It's us that move in here that it's almost like a sponge. We want to know more about this community because it is home. This is where we're raising our families, and more than likely, this is where we will be buried. Only got a couple of minutes left. Time goes fast.
Sure.
But I have to ask you, what's on the horizon for Rick Warrick, and how does and how do people get in contact with you?
Well, usually on the streets of Franklin, either at the archives or over at the post office at the Heritage Foundation office is where they let me have a hallway there, as you can see. And it's, but I hope to continue on. I'll be in a couple of weeks. I'll be 66, and I hope I've got a few more years left. But if I don't, I'm content.
You've got. I've got to ask you this. You've got a great affiliation for not just the history side, but the preservation side too.
Well, there's a lot to preserve. We've lost a lot, but yet in comparison to other counties, we've saved a lot.
In a few years, 50, recently an article came out in the year 2040 that there will be 1 million more people in Middle Tennessee than there are today. In the MSA, metropolitan area, 1 million more people. The challenge will be for all of us is to preserve what we've got, but at the same time, help to create those jobs in that next generation so that our families can come back here. And it is a tough balancing act. How do we do it?
Well, we made a pretty good start in a way. You think back, we have preserved some open spaces, probably not enough, but I think the land trust and some of the efforts on kind of fostering appreciation for the open space, the farms. We're no longer a farm. When I came, we were still a farming community in 1970. Today, there's probably not but 1 or 2 full-time farmers left in the county, and we need to try to protect that the best we can. But I think traffic and air quality and water quality, it's got to be something we've got to watch, because it's going to get where you can't get from one side of the county to the other in 30 minutes anymore.
Rick, have to go.
Oh,
I enjoyed it. Never enough time to talk to people like you. Maybe we'll come back and let's do another session and zero in on some specific ones.
anytime, buddy.
Thank you very much. I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County Mayor. Today we've had Rick Warrick, one of our treasures in our county. Have a good day.
WAKM AM 950, Williamson County's hometown radio, and WCTV, the education and government cable channel for Williamson County. Together, serving the fastest growing county in the great state of Tennessee.